MyFantasySportsTalk.com.
Last week on My Fantasy Podcast.
He's going to have some suitors, but I look at Mike Glennon, who's going to test the free agent market. I would rather have him as a quarterback than Kaepernick. Do I hear this properly? You're giving love to Chris Paul, kind of?
Yeah, because they kept winning and has held position with Blake Griffin missing significant time and Chris Paul missing significant time.
My best case scenario is right now Dak Prescott slightly gets injured in an off-season accident, kayaking.
Since drafting or trading for DeMarcus Cousins, the Pelicans have yet to win a game. They are 0-3, and guess what? Now DeMarcus Cousins is suspended for tonight's game.
This is a crushing blow, in my opinion, to the Raptors' chances this season. The misery that this is going to cause can inspire an entire Drake album. So that's quite possible after this. Man, I love football. That's all I can say. That's fantastic. I think people who listen to our podcast know how much, how strongly I think of Tony Romo. Let's just say
that. Get the hell out of here. When did this happen?
Yeah, it's true.
What up, podcast peeps? How you do? It's that time again. It's that time each week for you to basically just grab a drink, grab a pad, grab a pen, because you're going to be entertained, that's for sure. And we're going to have a good time here, and you're going to get knowledge dropped on you. So, pad, pen, I guess cell phone is what the kids use these days. Jot down notes of everything that we tell you here. So this is it. This is the show. You are experiencing My Fantasy Podcast. Now, each week we put ourselves through our own little combine, a little personal combine on the show, and today is no different. We basically got a mega loaded show for you on the rundown today as we talk March Madness, who's in, who's out. We give you our top 4 seeds as of right now. We will also talk NBA news as Bogut goes down and Kawhi goes off. Also, we'll squeeze in the opportunity to revisit that DeMarcus Cousins trade and who it's working out for. Love doing this. That's our new segment, weekly segment on the show. It's what I come here for, but how's that working out for the Pelicans? Anyway, we'll also go through a very busy NFL offseason and take a look at the free agents right now and react to what we saw in the combine over the last week. And of course, we'll answer your mailbag questions. So a lot of good ones this week that we're going to get into today. So let's not waste any more time. You are listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com live on YouTube. I am Brandon Reed, lead writer for MyFantasySportsTalk.com. Let me introduce our founder, our president, our editor-in-chief. He often talks to himself while watching college game film in 3D and thinks he really sees people in the room with him, and they start having conversations. He hears them responding, and he responds back. It's all the same dude. It's that man, Dan the Man Shaw, with his 2 pets over there, Des the Kitty, who is a regular on My Fantasy Podcast, and Romo the Dog. He hails from the greater Buffalo area. He is Dan the Man Shaw. And one question, what happened to Monmouth, Dan?
Oh my God, man, that was heartbreaking. I really felt bad for the seniors on that team because they had a couple of them that like Justin Robinson and Seabrook, who deserved to make the tournament in their time and in their college career. And sadly, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The MAC tournament, Horizon tournament, which I'm sure we're going to all get into, but it's been a crazy start to March, and it's something that I love. I know you love it, Brandon. So it's I can't wait, and I think it's only the conference tournaments are only going to be the beginning of the story that this NCAA tournament is going to tell, with a lot of upsets coming.
A lot to get into, and I'd like to talk about Monmouth a little bit more in just a little bit. Okay, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, okay, we can. Yep.
We'll talk about them. So, but that, and also you were busy on the radio last week.
Yeah, we our draft profiles that we've been bringing out have been pretty successful, and it's led us to being recognized on the radio, getting some radio interviews for myself, talking about these prospects in the upcoming draft. So it's with the combine this going on and in this weekend, it's the NFL draft is a big time, and check out all of the profiles on the site, because it's a lot of knowledge that we're dropping. And later this week I'll be on Iowa Sports Talk Radio talking about CJ Beathard, the Iowa quarterback. So it'll be a fun time, and I'm looking forward to it.
So that's coming up this week. I thought that was last week.
Yeah, no, it's this coming week.
Gotcha. So look forward to that. And it's not really our first rodeo as far as being invited to do things like that either, Dan.
Yeah. I was on with CBS Sports Radio a few weeks back. Brandon, you've had opportunities to speak with some of our other WBLZ hosts, Rudy Reyes and the Rude Dog Show. So we've definitely been well represented on the airwaves, all across the region.
That's right. MFST and the whole crew. Let me introduce a third part of this My Fantasy Podcast crew. Now he is back. It is time for the return of our resident actor and thespian. And he spends his free time driving around in Toyotas and watching Spurs basketball. Brand new Toyotas now. It used to be used Toyotas. Now it's brand new Toyotas. You can find him on Twitter by searching Brown Adam Schefter, but find him in those streets by Last Place Lando, and that's for real in the NBA league, aka it's Lando Yo, aka Zeke Virus, aka Zeke and Destroy, aka Team Torres, Orlando Torres. Welcome back, man. We're just proud of what you've been doing. Tell the folks why you weren't on the podcast last week.
First of all, it feels good to be back a part of the trio with you guys. And last week I had a audition for Toyota up in Austin, Texas, and I was there pretty much all day doing some stuff with them. So should find out more about the project tomorrow on the 8th. So as at the moment, that's all I can say. But everything went pretty good, positive, and it was fun. It's fun, and especially when you get paid for it.
No doubt. So keep us informed on that. And so we didn't get to talk to you, last week. So just real quickly, want to get your take, because we mentioned you on the podcast, talking about the Spurs and their chances to catch Golden State for that number 1 seed. So real quickly, tell us, you were kind of the opinion that they weren't even going to try. Do you still feel the same way right now?
I still feel the same way, but I mean, right now, who's to say? I mean, right now it looks like they could definitely catch that number 1 seed if they wanted to, but I think they might be better off not going after the number 1 seed. I don't think that's them. That's something that they would want to do. Locking up the 1 seed is something they could care least about. I think, again, just looking at overall their health, and you look at a guy like a Durant who just went down for the Warriors, and I think the Spurs might look at something like that and just start resting some of their players, especially how some of these games have been going into overtime. So a lot of them have been nail biters, so there's no need to really chase the number 1 seed, and they already clinched a playoff berth. So I think as long as they played safe and rest their guys, they could care less if they get the number 1 seed or not.
Yeah, and stay healthy, which is killing teams all around them. And so a big part of it there. So, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in our NBA segment in just a little bit. But for now, let's just jump right into it. Let's kick off My Fantasy Podcast by talking a little March Madness. Thanks for clicking. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Of course, we're live on YouTube right now. Check out the replays on YouTube. Check us out at myfantasysportstalk.com. Check us out on iTunes, SoundCloud. Of course, SPN, Sports Podcasting Network, that we debuted on a month or so ago. And now WBLZ Sports, WBLZsports.com. Check us out on their primetime drive, 3 to 5 Eastern time every Friday afternoon. So let's just get right into it. Now we're deep into tournament time, guys. March Madness is officially here. The big tournaments kicked off today, of course, with the ACC, because the conference has 27 members, so they have to start their tournament about a week out. But a lot of the smaller conferences wrapping up. Saw some exciting basketball last night. Gonzaga plays St. Mary's for the West Coast Conference Championship tonight. And we mentioned right off the top, Dan, that Monmouth did not survive the MAC conference tournament. And Siena and Iona put on quite a good show last night, and Iona gets the auto bid.
Yeah, it's definitely it was a surprising outcome. For myself, I covered Canisius, who's a member of the MAC all season long. Got to see all the teams play up close and personal when they came to Buffalo. So, Canisius was a team that actually beat Iona, so they can say they beat a member of the NCAA tournament team. But Monmouth was a team for me that was senior driven, had a lot of seniors on the team, and Justin Robinson, who in my mind was a player of the year candidate. I think he's a 2-time MAC player of the year. And it's tough to see his college career end without making it to the tournament. Hopefully they'll get an NIT bid and they can make a name that way, but I don't see them getting an at-large bid. Their resume out of conference isn't premier.
So, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. No chance they get an NCAA bid. Their resume is not that bad, and just like you talked about, the senior leadership and a superstar, no chance they can get into, because you got to think they would make some noise. They've had tournament history before.
I would hope so, but I saw them last year with honestly a better team. A team that beat a USC, a UCLA. They beat, I think it was 3 or 4 Pac-12 conference schools last season, and they didn't get an at-large bid. Only 3 mid-major teams did get an at-large bid last season. So it's going to depend on the committee and which way they want to approach it. Are they going to give and support those mid-major programs who had great regular seasons but couldn't close it in the conference, as opposed to those bottom to mid-level Power 5 conferences? So it's really going to depend on the committee approach and how they're going to select those teams.
Yeah, it is. The only thing, and we'll see, but one thing that I do see possibly helping a team like Monmouth, if not Monmouth, someone very similar, is that some of these so-called Power 5 conferences are really not that deep this year. Number one is the SEC. Even the Pac-12, not real deep as far as locks in this tournament. So that might help them a little bit, some of these Cinderellas and underdogs. So we'll see in a very short period of time. Orlando, what have you been keeping up with as far as the tournaments go? I know you're probably watching a little bit of tournament basketball this afternoon, but what have you seen so far? And just appreciative that it's March Madness time, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's been games all day. That's one thing to look forward to. So, no matter what, you can wake up and by noontime, there's a game or two on, and by the time it's pretty much the rest of your day. I was able to catch a little bit of the Monmouth and Siena game last night. I don't know much about Monmouth, but it was a pretty good game, and yeah, it was by that 4-point loss, it was a bit rough, and I did catch a bit of the Beacon and Wake Forest game today earlier. Wake Forest was able to pull away, and that was a pretty good game. And from what I know they're in, especially with the bubble watch, and they have a pretty good chance to make a run for it too.
All right, let me start with you, Orlando, because I know the Gonzaga plays St. Mary's tonight, who is ranked for that conference championship. is there a possibility St. Mary's beats them? A lot of people are saying no, Gonzaga's going to walk in, but I mean, you think this is going to be a pretty good game, right? They're ranked number 18, St. Mary's, that is, and Gonzaga's 4.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think we all know from at least from this year from the NCAA basketball is that nothing is a lock. Just like we mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of surprise teams. Like, yeah, a lot of it isn't deep, so it's not surprising if Gonzaga were to lose. I know a lot of people are not expecting that, but some that is a game I'm going to be watching, I'm sure, as everybody else is, and I wouldn't lock them in as a must win. And I think especially with Gonzaga, with all the hype and a lot of the attention they've been getting too, if they go in with that kind of mindset, it wouldn't be surprising to see them get knocked off.
I guess you're not going to stay up and watch the finale of this game tonight, right?
No, I'm definitely going to watch both the games, yeah.
And Dan, are you going to stay up and watch the West Coast Conference Championship, or do you think Gonzaga has it?
I mean, I think it's a 9 East. Is it a 9 Eastern start? So I might be able to catch the first half, and we'll see. I don't know. There's an NBC show called This Is Us. I don't know if you've caught it, but it's a tearjerker every week, Brandon. So I'm going to be glued to that from 9 to 10. Once we get off air. So yeah, I'm sure I'll catch a little bit of it, but to me, both teams are a lock. So we'll see them in the tournament and see how far they can advance that way.
However, a loss to St. Mary's probably bumps Gonzaga off.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to do our top 4 teams, even with the loss that they just had. I don't have them as a number 1 seed going into the tournament. I think that number 1 seed or that one loss that they got is going to hurt them.
And you're giving it to Oregon.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true. They have to. I mean, they have to win the Pac-12. But yeah, it's Oregon all the way, and that they didn't disappoint last year. I think when they were given a number 1 seed. Making it to the Elite Eight, I believe. But they're a dangerous team this year, and I think they deserve it over Gonzaga.
Gonzaga is going to go into the tournament with 1 loss, and you still got Oregon as a number 1 seed over them.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, based on conference schedule and things like that, I think it's you look at the teams that they played, and I just like Oregon's body of work. Taking that Pac-12, I think they only had 2 losses against Pac-12 opponents. I know you said it isn't deep, but when you can beat Arizona's consistently and UCLA's and USC's when you face them on a daily basis. I would like that a little bit more, and they still do have to win their conference tournament in order for them to get that number 1 seed. So that's furthering their body of work that against Gonzaga's. But if they don't win the conference tournament, then yeah, I can see Gonzaga get that number 1 seed. But the Pac-12 winner, if it's Oregon, I would give it to them.
Yep. Okay, I can see that. All right. So let's just talk real quickly about the teams that already are in the tournament who have punched their tickets so far. Florida Gulf Coast. I really like Florida Gulf Coast. Their style really hasn't changed much. They are still an exciting team to watch. I like them a lot. Anyway, Winthrop, UNC Wilmington, Iona, Wichita State, Jacksonville, and East Tennessee State is in. I saw a little bit of East Tennessee State, and one of the players I think that will be making some noise in the tournament, even if it's just for 1 game for East Tennessee State, is TJ Cromer. He had 40, 41 in the semifinals, then put up another 20 plus or so, and was just an ultimate scorer in East Tennessee's win. So just watch out for him. He'll be making some noise in the tournament. So just out of that group already punched their ticket, 7 teams. Orlando, do you see any one of those particular teams as being a Cinderella? Wichita State may be in a different category, but any of those other teams possibly Cinderellas?
Not so far what I've seen, but the Shockers, though. I mean, that's one Wichita State that you mentioned earlier. The way they've been playing, they are in a different category. Just everything, the way they space out, a lot of the stuff they do, they plays defensively as well. And the Shockers, I think are not so much a Cinderella, but I think a team that that punched it in, and that's always thrilling and exciting team to watch as well.
What about you, Dan? Any of those teams, Florida Gulf Coast, Winthrop, UNC Wilmington, Iona, Wichita State, Jacksonville, East Tennessee State, you see any of those as a big-time Cinderella making it to the second weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on matchups, but I have UNC Wilmington as a dark horse Sweet 16 team in my book. East Tennessee State's the same way. I've broadcast a few times that I like to play some wagers on college basketball throughout the regular season, and ETSU has definitely won me some money this year. So I'm definitely going to ride that bandwagon as long as I can. They're a pretty dangerous team. So I like a couple of those names coming out of there. The MAC opponent, the Iona, that I get a chance to kind of see up close. I don't think they're going to be that capable. It depends who obviously they get seeded with, but I don't see them as a very dangerous team in March. So a couple of those names I think are going to be one and dones, but there's a couple in there that you can see win a couple games.
You like Wichita State, though, right? Greg Marshall, he'll be at the top of all the coaching, candidate list again in this offseason, and probably because they're going to make at least another Sweet 16, right?
Yeah, and I hope the committee gives them some respect, so they can see that the times that they beat Illinois State, who I think should make the tournament. I would love to see Illinois State. I think they've been a solid team all year. I've watched a few of their games, followed them a little bit. I think they're a contender. I don't think they're going to go. They're not going to get in, but they have a chance. But I would like to see them. I mean, they beat Wichita State once this year, but they got slaughtered the other two times. So Wichita State can be a dangerous team every March, no matter their seed. And I think this year they're going to have a pretty decent seed coming behind them. So they're going to play some lower ranked teams, maybe 1 and 2 rounds.
Let's talk a little bit of the bubble teams now and transition into teams that are on the supposed bubble and what their chances may be. And one of them I came across today is a really good Big Ten battle. And I got to analyzing this, okay? And Dan, you proclaimed, and we were on the podcast last week when Northwestern beat Michigan and everybody projected them in now. Dan, have you had a chance to look at a resume-by-resume comparison of Northwestern and Michigan State? Why Northwestern a lock and not Michigan State? And just before you answer, the one meeting, Michigan State whooped them pretty good. Well, not 9, but they beat them. Why Northwestern over a team like Michigan State, or should they both be on the bubble?
Well, I have them both in. I think they're both going to make it into the tournament. I think Northwestern, any team that has a positive winning record in the Big Ten conference play, I think has a chance to automatically be considered for entry into the tournament. And I don't have Northwestern's right offhand with me, but I'm pretty sure that they're above 500 or at least hovering around that. Michigan State, I think, actually might even be a little bit lower, but both teams are NCAA tournament teams to me. And I actually have, we get a mailbag question later that we'll get into, but one of these two teams is one of my answers for that question of who is a Final Four contender that's not ranked in the top 25. So it's a sneak preview to the audience. One of the two teams that you just named here are in that group.
Wow. Okay. I don't know. Honestly, I don't. I'm trying to get into your head, and I really don't know. Orlando, what do you think? A lot of people are saying Northwestern in. What's the resume-by-resume comparison? Michigan State and Northwestern. Is one in and the other one's not, or what?
No, I kind of agree with Dan. I think they're both in. I mean, that's kind of odd, and I think it just falls a lot to what a lot of people have been saying. A lot of this isn't a lock, but I mean, both teams, I would say they're in, especially where the division that they play out of, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go forward. I don't really see a huge gap in the comparisons between them.
All right, and Dan mentioned the Big Ten and how tough that conference is. So here's a number. And Michigan State, and I don't have Northwestern in front of me, but I think it's right there with Michigan State. Michigan State is 10-8 in the Big Ten. That's good enough for 6. And Northwestern finished 5th. I do know that. So their record's probably very similar. But another team on the so-called bubble is Kansas State, and their conference record in the Big Ten is 8-10. So 2 games under 500, yet 19-12 overall. With the strength of schedule 52 and an RPI roughly the same. So Where do you have Kansas State, Dan? Are they in, are they out, or are they that notch below the other two?
Yeah, they're out for me. I actually don't have Kansas State in the tournament. I think the Big 12 to me is a lesser of a conference than the Big 10. So if you can't have a winning record in that type of conference, albeit it is deep and it is a solid one. You look at teams that you can beat up on, like the Texas, the middle level ones, like a TCU. I would see a Big 10 Minnesota taking out that. So you kind of compare the depth of those conferences and the overall strength of schedule. I like the Big 10 teams a little bit more than Kansas State.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Yep. Big. I had the conference wrong, didn't I? Yep. Anyway, six in the Big 12, but they are one of those bubble teams. So right there fighting in that position. So let me move on to the Pac-12, Dan, and you're the conference of your Oregon squad there. So there's I know one team that's sitting here is Cal, and in the Pac-12 they are 10-8, 19-11 overall. So strength of schedule is 42. A lot of that is to playing in the major Pac-12 conference. So what about Cal?
They're a big question mark for me. I would like to see them in. I think they have a team that can compete and deserves to play in the tournament. But I don't know. Like I've kind of alluded to before, where the committee will lie, but they are the one team that's kind of hovering for me on whether to be in or out. Ivan Rabb is a center forward that will play in the NBA one day, and he's fun to watch. So I would like to see his career get extended. But right now, they're going to be sweating it out. It's going to depend on how many games they can win inside their conference tournament. Because if they're a one and done, they can only play that one game in the conference tournament, not succeed. Then I don't see them. I would see that bubble being burst.
Well, I'll take that even a step further. I think they have to be Oregon, UCLA, or Arizona, honestly, because can I tell you a stat that may sway your opinion? Versus the top 50, they are 1-7.
Yeah,
so they're getting opportunities, but they ain't beating good teams.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great stat. So yeah, I agree. If they can show that they can beat one of those top level teams, then maybe they have a chance. But otherwise, they might be on the outside looking in.
What's going on out west, Orlando? What do you think? Is this one of those conferences that probably should only get about 3 teams, or is it a little bit deeper and you think someone like a Cal could sneak in?
I think someone like a Cal could sneak in, but one of the teams out of the West that I have my eyes on, and is Butler. And I know they're not too far right behind Oregon, but Butler is a team that I'm keeping an eye on, and great story, of an underdog. And, there's one of those teams that could come out and surprise. And just like Dan mentioned about, Oregon coming out of him, maybe not so much Gonzaga, I would love to see Butler come out of it. And, I don't know if they're going to be able to, their strength in the schedule, they're going to be able to come up and, be as much as a pushover to some of those other teams like Oregon, Gonzaga. But that's one of the teams I'm definitely keeping an eye on that I think can make some noise out there in the West in the Pac-12.
Well, let's move on and talk about an East Coast team, because we had a question about these Cuse Orange last week, and so here they come up, still on that bubble. I don't know. Here's what, and I said out last week. I'm saying out again this week, and let me tell you why, because I found another stat that I just realized today, is Syracuse is just 2-10 away from the Carrier Dome this year. They're getting opportunities too. They're 3-4 against top 25, 3-3 against top 50. So yeah, they're taking punches, but they're giving them back too. But only 2-10 away from the Carrier Dome. They did beat Georgia Tech though, Dan.
Well, congratulations to them. They're in. Namesake alone, Jim Boeheim. He's going to be in the tournament. So I'm not sweating if I were a Cuse fan.
Really? Okay. All right. Orlando, have you been keeping up with Syracuse? Do you think they deserve to be in or out?
No, I've been keeping up with Syracuse too. I'm going to say they're in. Beating Duke, Georgia Tech. They've been working for it. Andrew White, I think, has been playing really good for them. And so far, I wouldn't consider them out right away. I like what Syracuse has been doing. They started off horrible. They weren't expected in, but the way they've been playing, scratching and clawing to get into it, and they beat some of the top 10 teams. Like Syracuse. I have a question about them being out.
And Brandon, don't you have to give credit to any team that can beat a Josh Pastner coach team? So, if Syracuse can pull off a win against the Georgia Tech coach Josh Pastner team, come on, that's tournament bound.
I would not necessarily say that's tournament bound as in job saving. It's Boeheim, of course, but yeah, no, that does not impress me. Okay. But good luck to Josh. Maybe they make the NIT. Probably should make the NIT. It's fun when you can coach ACC talent. Boy, this is fun. Watch and move on to a Power 5 conference, the SEC, before getting into mailbag questions next. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast live on YouTube. Brandon Reed here. Orlando is back, and of course, Dan the Man Schalk is here. So the Power 5 conference I want to talk about, guys, is the SEC. As of right now, I'm looking at locks in the SEC. I got Florida, Kentucky, Arkansas, South Carolina is the stretch, guys. And I'm even pausing when I get to Arkansas. I guess they're in, but they just don't scare me. Dan, what's up in the SEC this year? Just not great basketball this year.
Yeah, no, it's actually been rough to watch. I love watching college basketball, but the SEC, there's something about it. Even Kentucky, I know they're a fun team to watch, but I've struggled watching a Kentucky Auburn game. It hasn't been the smoothest, and I think Arkansas will get in anytime you're 23-8. And you are in a Power 5 conference, whether it is the SEC. I think you're going to get in the tournament. I have them in South Carolina. Yeah, I think you're going to see 4 teams, but that's going to be it. You're not going to see any more in the SEC. It's going to be shallow waters and slim picking.
Yeah, I agree. I don't need any more than 4, and 4 may be a stretch. So as far as Arkansas goes, 0-4 against the top 25, but then they pick it up. They're 4-2 against 26 through 50. And then 51 through 100, they're 7-0. So they are basically beating the teams that they should beat. Teams that they should beat, they're 19-2 against. So that's not bad. Just not really any huge caliber wins this season. Didn't not even sure they played Kentucky, or if they did, they got whooped. I don't remember, but I agree with you as far as the SEC as a whole. Kentucky doesn't look the best. They don't have that usual interior play they normally do. Malik Monk is outstanding, but still, you're talking about a very young team. And Florida's up and down too. So, I mean, even the cream of the crop that would come out of the SEC is not really fearful. We'll give our top 4 seeds in just a second and talk about that, but I'll play spoiler for you here right quick, Dan. I'm not projecting any team out of the SEC to make it to the Final Four, although I think I had Kentucky maybe a month or so back, but not anymore. One of those conferences, they're not a lock for a lot of teams. Real quickly, guys, the ACC locks is looking like Louisville, North Carolina, Florida State, Duke, Virginia, Notre Dame, Miami, Virginia Tech, looking like locks. That is just a stupid, deep conference and almost unfair. Do you feel the same way, Dan? That's a stupid, deep conference.
Yeah. I was looking at the conference tournament bracket, and you have, I think it was North Carolina, Duke, Louisville, Syracuse, all in just one half of the bracket. And that's insane in tournament play. That's just half of, going through part of the ACC, and it's so deep. And, it's, to me, looking at that, it's a huge advantage for a team like Florida State. I think you're going to see Florida State possibly get to the ACC conference tournament final. Whether or not they're the best team or in that conference or even the best top 4, you're going to see them get to the final. And that's going to help them get a better seed. And who knows, with that seeding, that can be a dangerous mix come tournament time in March. So yeah, I mean that the ACC is disgustingly deep, and they're going to probably get a record number of teams, like I said last weekend.
So we're gonna actually do our predictions next week and break it down at least the first weekend on the show next week. So, but since Selection Sunday is this coming Sunday, and we're not going to get a chance to do a podcast or mention that again until next week, go ahead and give me your top 4 seeds, Orlando. Who's going to get those top 4 seeds of each region?
Yeah, I mean the top 4 seeds. I mean, obviously still early, but I have to go and just give you my top 4 seeds. And I'm going to stick with I'm going to say Butler. I know that's a bit of a toss up there, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Butler, Oregon, and Gonzaga. Stick with Villanova, West Virginia, and Kansas.
All right, you said Butler. Do you mean Baylor? Are you talking about Butler?
Yeah.
Butler? What you talking about? You made me Baylor. Butler? Are you serious?
But Butler.
You fell in love with Butler. Okay.
The story of an underdog. Let's see what happens.
Very, very underdog. We'll see. Dan, go ahead.
My number 1 overall seed is going to be Kansas. I think, going through Big 12 play, they're going to win their conference tournament. You're going to see them lock up a number 1 seed. North Carolina, they don't even have to win their conference tournament, similar to Kansas, to lock up a number 1 seed. But as long as they win a couple games, I think they're going to be a number 1 seed as well. I'm going to give love to my Ducks, Oregon Ducks. Rest in peace, Colorado Buffaloes. You're not going to sniff the tournament. So I'm going to at least root for a Pac-12 team, and that'll be Oregon. I think they're going to lock down a number 1 seed, and Villanova. You gotta respect the defending champs and Jay Wright. So watch out, because Villanova, I think, has a serious chance to compete for back-to-back titles.
Yeah, they do. I'm not going to disagree with you there at all. My first, I think, again, I agree with you. The overall seed will be the Kansas Jayhawks. They'll go through the conference tournament most likely. Number 2 seed I've got or the second number 1 seed I have as a lock is Villanova. I agree with you again. Very good chance they could run the table and win the championship again. I do have Gonzaga beating St. Mary's tonight and earning a number 1 seed, as they should, at 31-1. And then I guess I agree with you with North Carolina, because I think they are the cream of the crop of the ACC. And I think if they do go through the conference tournament and win it, then I think traditionally that team always gets a number 1 seed. So they'd be beating out the combination of UCLA or Oregon, whichever one of those makes the most noise in the Pac-12 conference tournament. So, but my killer for you, I guess, Dan, is that Gonzaga is bumping your Oregon team out of that number 1 seed, is what I think. So, but I cannot wait to find out. All the conference tournaments kicking off into high gear now. So let's get to the mailbag questions, the questions and topics that you want to discuss at home. And our first one comes from Belinda Watson, and she echoes our sentiment here. What a crazy start to the conference tournament season. Horizon and MAC saw their favorites go down. What other number 1 seeds do you see not winning their conference tournament? So number 1 seeds in the conference tournaments that will go down and not get the auto bid in their conference from the conference tournament. Belinda Watson wants to know. Orlando, go.
Well, just as I mentioned earlier, I don't think North Carolina makes it out of the SEC. So I have to see number 1 possibly in a weak division that we mentioned earlier. It would be North Carolina.
All right. Well, he's just going in the face of everything we say, damn. We got Butler in the Final Four. He's saying North Carolina ain't gonna do nothing. Okay. Anybody else, Orlando? Any other top dog you see may not surviving their conference tournament?
No.
Everybody else, okay. Butler's good. North Carolina sucks. Go, Dan.
I actually do have North Carolina on this list as well, just because the ACC is so deep. You never know what team can knock off one in any given game. So North Carolina, like I said, is going to have a tough road. They're going to have to face some of those type of Duke, Louisville, Syracuse right off the bat pretty quickly before they even face the second half of the tournament. So I do have North Carolina on that list. A couple other ones, Purdue out of the Big Ten. I've preached them as a Final Four team all year. But that Big Ten, same way as the ACC, it's a deep conference. You never know what can happen come conference tournament play. And
But
then
that may
another guy,
propel them to the Final Four, right?
I do still have them. Yeah, I think they still will make the Final Four as of right now.
Sometimes a late season loss is good for a team.
Yep. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be anything too crushing to their resume or anything like that. And then one final team I'll give you is out of the Atlantic 10, Dayton. They're a great team. I think they're obviously a lock for the tournament, but that A10 team, that A10 tournament is deep as well. You have Dayton, VCU, St. Bonaventure, a couple different schools that can compete there. Rhode Island is another team that I like that's on the bubble that they'll be playing for their lives this weekend. So that's a conference tournament I'm going to be watching a lot of, and I don't think Dayton's going to be able to pull it out.
So you're that high on Dayton. I know a lot of people are. You really you think they could?
I mean, basically, it's just every year Dayton is there. They're well coached with Archie Miller.
They usually have a home game or two because there's usually always a regional played at Dayton, or a first round weekend played in Dayton, Ohio, on their home floor.
Then I'll just a little quick story about Dayton fans. They are very passionate about their school. My dad and I went to the tournament that came to Buffalo a couple years ago, and it was the year that Dayton played Syracuse, and Dayton actually upset Syracuse in the first round. And we were at a bar at halftime of one of the sessions, a little break, and talking to a couple Dayton fans. They had tattoos all over their body of Dayton logos. They go to Hawaii every year as an annual Dayton trip. It's pretty wild how crazy Dayton fans get, and they're passionate. I mean, it's not even just the men's side; it's women's basketball too. They follow both. They travel with the team every road trip, and they don't even have kids on the team. They're just Dayton fans, which is mind blowing. But that's something special about college basketball that you don't get with any other sport.
Well, in Dayton, Ohio is presumably a college town, and that is like the big thing of the town. So, I guess I could see that.
Yeah, that's I guess so. I mean, I grew up in Buffalo, so we're used to losing with our football and hockey teams. So we're not used to following teams or witnessing any type of glory. So it definitely doesn't happen around here.
Hey, Buffalo went through their glory days, okay?
Yeah.
I know you were probably quite young, but it happened. So
Goo goo gaga. That's what I was doing.
And then them Sabres.
Something about hockey. Yeah. Well, I think this is the first time we've ever talked hockey on the show, which, to those hockey fans out there, there you go. You got your fix.
I don't know that this qualifies as talking hockey.
We mentioned it. It's been mentioned.
And that's going to be it probably for the spring. Okay, count it. Mark that on the tab when you're writing out the article, Dan. Say we mentioned hockey. So if you want your hockey fix, your NHL fix, My Fantasy Podcast is the place. There you go. But I agree with Belinda Watson, Oakland, Valpo, Green Bay. I had them down as all going down in their horizon, are going down in the horizon. The Northern Kentucky and Milwaukee fighting for the auto bid. So I know if y'all are probably watching this game, you heard this, but if Northern Kentucky wins, of course, is their first appearance ever. If Milwaukee wins, it's going to set the record for most losses by an NCAA tournament team, which I think they have like 25, 26 losses or something like 9-26 or something like that. Crazy. So that's something interesting to look out for, to see who finishes up there. Milwaukee finished dead last in the horizon, 4-14, and here they are. They're fighting for a tournament bid, and a team like Monmouth is on the outside, probably going to the NIT most likely. Milwaukee was on a 9-game losing streak until rolling off 3 in a row in the Horizon tourney, so they didn't do nothing all season long. Maybe it's a new strategy, just gear up for the conference tournament, but that's what Milwaukee's strategy is right now. So, but what happened to Monmouth, tournament madness, conference tournament madness, but as far as some of the top dogs in conferences that I possibly see going down, I'm going to throw it right in Dan's face. I think Oregon will be beat by whoever survives the UCLA-Arizona semifinal. I really do. And I like UCLA and Arizona to get a little bit farther than Oregon in the tournament. We'll have to see how the bracket works out, but I like both those teams a little bit better than Oregon. So Big Ten, I like Maryland to win this tournament. Purdue beat Maryland by 1 this year, and I like Maryland from last year. I like Purdue a lot too, but they just, I don't know, something about them. I just don't quite like. And I was watching them. I don't think, we talked about last week, Dan, where you mentioned Caleb Swanigan and the big guy Isaac Haas. As I was talking about, it doesn't seem like they play them on the court at the same time together. Now, if they do that and can control the pace and tempo, those two guys are unstoppable. But I don't know, they really weren't doing that from what I saw in the last couple of games. So I don't know, but and the other thing is, in the semifinal, here's the big thing. If I looked at the tournament bracket correctly, I don't remember, but I think Purdue would have to meet up maybe with Michigan State if they can pull off a game, and I don't want to play Tom Izzo in March. I really don't. So there's one, too, and I know a team that you're on, Dan, is Cincinnati. I think they could beat SMU and take the American Conference tournament. So nothing really guaranteeing the saying that SMU is going to walk away with that crown. Cincinnati's ranked, and they're a good team as well. So that's just some of the teams, or some of the number one teams in the conference that I possibly could see going down. They all could go down. It's so tough. Like these guys were saying, North Carolina could go down because the ACC is just so tough. So we'll see. It's that time of year. So let's let it all play out. Let's go to our next question from the March Madness variety. Comes from Alex Freeman. Give me 2 teams not ranked in the AP poll that could make the Final Four. So this is a stretch, guys. 2 teams right now. 2, okay? Alex is demanding 2, not just 1. 2 teams that could actually make the Final Four that aren't even in the top 25 right now. Orlando?
Oh man, I can't give you 2 right off the top of my head. I know
Butler is
demanding that.
Butler ranked. That's one of them.
Butler. You've been preaching them all week.
All right. Well, besides Butler, I'm gonna stick with Syracuse. I think they're getting hot at the right moment. I know it's a stretch. I mean, I know Brandon obviously doesn't believe in them, and some of the teams that they beat. And again, I just think they're getting hot at the right time. And if I have to go with the stretch and pick one of those teams, I'm gonna stick with the Qs.
Yeah, they did it last year. That's my only hesitation is they did almost the same exact thing last year. I just don't think they are as talented this year as they were last year. Dan, pick 2 teams that could make the Final Four that aren't even ranked right now.
Well, I know the listeners are wanting the answer of that Big Ten matchup between Northwestern and Michigan State, and the answer is simple. It's Michigan State. It's Tom Izzo, as Brandon just said a moment ago. You don't count Tom Izzo out in March. Any Tom Izzo coach team, I think, can win. So they're a sleeper contender. As long as they make it, they have a chance to make a run. And I'm going to give you a little obscure name, and that's the Vermont University to make a run at the Final Four. You probably won't see it, but I can see a George Mason in them. They're 28-5. They haven't lost in conference play.
Catamounts.
The Catamounts. And they're always in it. They've had a couple Cinderella years in them previously, years back. So I think this could possibly be another year. Not ranked in the top 25, making a run at the Final Four.
Yeah, they have had a history of doing it. They've had a history somewhat similar of back in the day. That team that used to do it all the time almost beat Duke that year. Butler. Yeah, that team. Very similar history there. Oh, okay. Hey, that's March Madness in a little bitty nutshell over just the last couple of days. We don't know much more until everything plays out over the next few days and the conference tournaments really get underway and developed, and see who is automatic qualifiers, the favorites that win that may help a Cinderella get bumped in, or the upsets that may happen and help bump a Cinderella out? We don't know, but there's a lot going on the next couple of days with the conference tournaments, and then Selection Sunday is this Sunday. So next week we will have the full tournament brackets, breakdown, surprises, reactions, and predictions, all that on My Fantasy Podcast. So let's leave NCAA basketball right there. That was enough for this week. Geez, guys. We need like a 6-hour show, to be honest with you, but then I'd have to quit a job and do some other things. So, but we're going to move on into the NBA right now, and just some of the stories that I saw. Andrew Bogut goes down. Kawhi Leonard goes off and helps beat the Rockets. So let's start right there. How big of a deal is it? And me and Dan spoke on Andrew Bogut last week, and last night's news doesn't really affect things much as far as we go. So I want to go to Orlando. How much does Bogut going down for Cleveland hurt them?
I don't think it hurts him at all. I mean, it's unfortunate for Bogut.
You must have listened to the podcast last week.
Of course, I want to see y'all guys whenever. But yeah, it doesn't affect him at all. It's unfortunate for Bogut that, you know, he suffered this injury. I mean, pretty much his career with the Cavs ended as soon as it started. But it doesn't hurt the Cavs at all, not in my opinion.
Yeah, it kind of sucks that it was 58 seconds into his Cavs debut, so he really didn't even get a taste, and that's it. So he's got to be crushed. But Dan, this doesn't really affect the Cavs on-court performance at all.
No, I don't. Little to no effect. We'll see how they deal. Like the bigger thing we talked about last week, Darren Williams, he was the key pickup at that deadline. So we'll see how he comes back and plays with him. I know he missed a game-winning 3 late last week. You know, when they had a chance to win. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, the Bogut injury, it's kind of tough, but it's Andrew Bogut. He always gets hurt. It's something to expect.
Yeah, not a good start, and I guess maybe not a good finish. So for Andrew Bogut, but the Cavs did end up falling in that game to the Heat, 106-98. So I don't know if that's a tale of anything to come, but the Cavs, you know, I realized looking at the standings, they're not really even just a great team. Their record isn't even, you know, inspiring or, you know, blow you away this year. You know, they're of course the top seed in the East, but record is not just outstanding. So I looked at so many teams that would be seated very high in the Eastern Conference. Competitors would be at least like a 3 seed in that Eastern Conference. So, but anyway, the other thing is Kawhi goes off last night. Orlando.
Yeah, no. The stretch, I mean, I think it was like his 4th straight 30-point game. It's something exciting. And not only that, I think this performance, you know, it puts him back in the MVP race, and not so much that. Just you look at some of these games, these close games, the Spurs have been kind of sloppy lately. And if it wasn't, you know, just not just for his defense, but, you know, it's him with the high scoring that he's been doing lately. Like some of these games we would have lost. We could have easily lost to the Timberwolves the other night. We could have easily lost to the Pelicans and to the Pacers at home. And then Houston gave us a run for money, which that was a game we could have also lost too. So, I mean, if you think about it, this is something he's been doing pretty much all season, but it's getting something that, you know, we're used to seeing. And as a Spurs fan, it's great seeing, you know, Kawhi being able to perform like that offensively and defensively, but it's still something, you know, you don't want to see. You're used to the Spurs being a team, you know, just playing as a team win and not depending on that one guy. And so far, that's what we've been doing since, you know, with the new look. It's, you know, we're relying a lot on Kawhi Leonard. LaMarcus Aldridge has been a bit disappointing lately. Same thing with Danny Green. And again, I know it was just a good night for Kawhi last night, but this is something, you know, you don't hope to see continue much longer, and hopefully the team can kind of get back to that chemistry that they had.
Yeah, but hopefully so. And you mentioned it kind of been playing sluggish lately. They could be playing like the Memphis Grizzlies, but they haven't quite sunk that far yet. But I kind of agree with you. Me and Dan talked about it last week. Is this is kind of an older team? But let me go back to what I opened up the show with. Speaking with you is that you really don't think that they're interested in the number 1 seed, because wouldn't home court be a pretty big deal through the playoffs?
Yeah, we've seen before. I mean, the Spurs can go on the road and win. I know locking up the number 1 seed probably will be a big priority. But again, if we could get the number 1 seed, that'll be great. But I don't think that's the goal. I don't think they're going out there to lock up the number 1 seed. They already clinched a berth. I think now it's just getting through. It's just getting through the season and probably not trying to have as many nail biters as we did last night.
Well, they're 2.5 out of first place behind Golden State right now. Dan, should being the number 1 seed not be a priority in San Antonio?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of the Popovich way, like Bill Belichick. I'm going to believe in whatever he wants to do. I mentioned on the podcast last week, watching Tony Parker play is kind of like watching molasses slowly drip down a tree into a pile of death. So, I mean, Tony Parker needs all the rest he can get, and if that means you're going to get the number 2 seed, then so be it. But you got to look out for their age, and it's not looking good for the Spurs. And so if they need to rest to make a trip to the finals again, let them.
Man, you and our listeners at home are killing Tony Parker lately, Dan. We've got a question
that
from
inspired me. That question did kind of inspire me to get some hate out. So I'm glad.
Poetry. It inspired you to read poetry books, the way you can drop some hate there.
Mm-hmm.
Our number 1 fans, Nick and Judy Pertins. I think Nick had a question for us, but we'll get to that in just a second. And he wasn't too high on Tony Parker either. Orlando, I don't even want to read you this, man. It's bad. Cover your eyes and ears, okay? But anyway, we'll get to that in just a second if you want to hang around, Orlando.
Sure.
But
I'll hear what he had to say about the 4-time NBA champs. So whatever it is, I'll pay the man his respect. So,
touche. All right. So let's talk about DeMarcus Cousins, folks. I'm not sure we've had a chance. Well, I know we hadn't had a chance to talk to Orlando about this in a while. So I just want to talk about it because, okay, here we go. Pelicans did win their first game with Cousins on the floor. They beat the Lakers 105-97. They're actually 2-5 since the DeMarcus Cousins trade. That other win was against the Pistons, and Dan actually called it, and I wasn't even thinking about it because when he said he'd be suspended, DeMarcus Cousins would be suspended for his 4th game, which was against those Pistons. Wasn't even playing the 4th game of the DeMarcus Cousins era. Dan said, well, maybe they might win. They sure as hell did. They won 109-86 after they've been losing and getting crushed, and Davis had 33 DeMarcus Cousins on the floor. Apparently the team had success and they won. So I don't know how many times I got to keep making this case to disbelievers out there. Orlando, what's your take on the whole DeMarcus Cousins trade and just all that stuff I just mentioned to you that is facts? Who won? I mean, are people still arguing that New Orleans won this trade?
I'll tell you one thing. This is a trade. I don't think it's looking at it. I don't think it's a bad trade for New Orleans, and I know they've been 2-5 since. But I think this is more of something I kind of revisit within a year from now, and see what they're doing if DeMarcus Cousins still with the team. Because you look at the team, they don't have a lot of playmakers in New Orleans. I mean, anytime you're relying on Solomon Hill to play 30+ minutes, you're not going to have a good night. I mean, besides Drew Holiday, they don't have any true playmakers on that team. It's just those 2 big guys I think they're relying on a lot, and they're relying on Cousins to do a lot of stuff. And same thing with Anthony Davis. And, this is a team that I want to see what other pieces they could add to the draft and through free agency coming up in the offseason. And, I mean, there's no way they're making a playoff somewhere. At this point, there's just even no trying. So, from the looks of it, I don't mind Cousins with the Pelicans. I think this is something that can still work out for them, be a positive. And, again, it's too early to say that they lost this trade because I want to see where they are in a year from now and see what they add and the combo of Davis and Cousins and Holiday and whoever else they can add. I still think this could be a pretty scary team, going forward in the future. And I'm not gonna, I know in the beginning I said I was on there saying too that New Orleans lost his trade and it wasn't gonna work out, but I think this is something that could work out, and I just don't think they have the right pieces.
Okay. Well, I'll message you after the podcast and tell you how it's going to work out, Orlando.
We'll see what happens in a year or so. I don't think it's that bad for New Orleans.
There's other teams that could be worse. Yeah, I agree with you there, but it ain't going anywhere. Dan, I know you probably don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but again, just all those funny things like you called out last week. They'll probably win without DeMarcus on the floor. They did. They finally win a game, but it was against the Lakers. This whole thing is getting comical to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in more of your boat there. I don't like the trade for New Orleans. I think they're going to find out in a year what a mistake it was, or a year and a half when he leaves in free agency, and all they have is a whole pile of losses. So, it's going to be something to keep an eye on. But he and the Pelicans are kind of fade off once the playoffs starts because they won't be in it.
No, they're slipping. They're slipping even further. That's the thing. Sacramento's right there, even still fighting, but Pelicans, they're slipping. And that's why it was so ironic that I predicted last week that the Lakers will finish with a better record than New Orleans, and it would happen to be the Lakers that they beat, but whatever. Okay, one last thing as far as NBA news and notes for today. Portland and Minnesota was postponed last night due to condensation on the floor with the ice they have for that other sport out there that we mentioned before. There's two mentions, okay? But anyway, condensation on the floor last night. So that got me thinking, this has happened a couple of different times this year. What happens to you playing fantasy, and how irate are you that this screws up your fantasy when these guys miss games or a game is postponed due to something like this? Because you don't get to make it up in your fantasy league. Well, they can make up the game, but you don't know which, what week that may be, how important the matchup may be when that is made up. And if you're playing daily fantasy, which is this is the position I was in last night, there is no makeup. That's a big fat zero for you. And let me tell you, I played a particular contest last night and did win a little bit of money. I was, up in the upper half, but I had Mo Harkless on my team. And that was a zero in a lot more money. And that's just the breaks that happen. That's happened to me several times. And also every time it does, it kind of turns me off from daily fantasy for a little while too, because nothing you can do about it. So Orlando, has that happened to you? How do you feel about that? It's just one of those things you got to suck up and deal with, right? But man, it sucks.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's something you can do about it. It's just one of those things you have to go with. And it's unfortunate that they had to postpone the game after they had let a bunch of fans into the stadium for the home game. But I don't know. That's something they could fix. That's something, I think maybe could have been handled better. And probably, they're not used to the warm weather this time out there in Minnesota. But that's just, yeah.
The humidity, they're saying the humidity kicked up and it's higher than it normally is. So that caused the condensation.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw the tweet that they had sent out to the Wolves, whatever company it was, because I know it was a promotion for Disney on Ice the week prior. So they had apologized to them, and then they had sent a GIF with Michael Urkel saying, "Did I do that?" And I thought that was pretty hilarious. But at the end of the day, they still got a game postponed, and it ruins some fantasy implications. But I mean, there's not much you can do. You can argue all you want about things. There's not much you're going to get out of it.
No, there's nothing you can do about that. But it is a little bit more important. Well, first of all, if you're playing daily fantasy and have money on the line, it's important to you always. But now that we're getting deeper in the seasons and people's playoffs and seedings and possibly even started the playoffs could be affected by this type of thing. Dan, has that ever happened to you? Maybe more so on a daily level. On a league, you can maybe get over it, not that big of a deal. But has it happened to you playing daily fantasy?
Not in the NBA. I'll tell you this, because you're going to be a part of this, Brandon, is the fantasy baseball. It affects you a lot because you have rain delays, weather outages. So games get canceled and made up all the time in fantasy, and it affects you because it affects you that week, and it doesn't get made up until weeks later. So
that's true. But they always do make it up, whether it's doubleheader or whatever.
Usually, yes. It's a very rare scenario, but sometimes it's not until the end of the season. So if it's a rain delay or rain out in May, it might not get made up until September. Your season's already over. So I've had a few scenarios, and it definitely stinks, but it's nothing you can really do. It's kind of acts of God, free Mother Nature, things of that sort. That you just kind of get angry, but at the same time, what are you getting angry at? It's not anything that's really controllable.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more upsetting to me when there's potential money on the line. Like I said last night, it really kind of sucked because I would have had a pretty good score. But what do you do? It almost ruined my night when I saw that. One trailblazer almost ruined my night. But hey, let's hear from you, the folks at home, if that ever happened to you. Maybe worst case scenario, maybe some of you have lost big time money because that exact thing happened to you. It happens. It's happened to me several times this NBA season. As Dan said, MLB happens all the time. So. And then scratches in football, it always happens. Healthy scratches happens all the time. It's happened to me in NBA. So let's hear from you. Worst case scenarios, has that happened to you where some sort of postponement or a healthy scratch last minute cost you big time money or cost you big time in your league? Let us hear about it. Let's answer some mailbag questions next. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast on YouTube Live. Watch the replays on YouTube. Check us out on the website, myfantasysportstalk.com. Check us out, iTunes, SoundCloud, SPN, Sports Podcasting Network, and WBLZSports.com. All of those. You choose one of those and just click and listen, watch. I don't care. Just choose one and stick with us each and every week. Time to go to the NBA Big Mailbag. And the first one comes from our favorite fans, Dan, the Purtons. We're almost like gift card trading now. A lovely message from the Purtons. Merry Christmas. Nick and Judy, appreciate it. Brandon, I got to thinking. Let's say our Grizzlies nail down the number 6 seed in the West. If it were to end right now, they'd play the Rockets, 7th spot, and take on a team like the Spurs. Because I heard Dan last week mention Tony Parker, and I couldn't agree more that he is so done. It's like it's like overcooking Spam and still eating it every single game. Who do you want the Grizz to face? Who is your ideal matchup? From the Purtons fam, Nick and Judy, the whole fam. Appreciate it, guys. Before we let Orlando respond, because he's fuming over there. He ain't digging this, okay? But anyway, it's Grizzlies talk time, okay? I don't want to eat overcooked Spam, but I also don't want like my eggs sunny side up, and that's what you got with the Golden State Warriors. So either way, I don't really like it, to be honest with you. If we fall to that 7th seed, we actually even risk playing Golden State at the 2 seed because, like I said, I think the Spurs will fight for that number 1 seed. It's not guaranteed that they won't get that number 1 seed. 2.5 games out right now, okay? So either way, it's not looking good. The thing about San Antonio and playing San Antonio is, yes, I agree with Tony Parker and just the aging team, and they don't really scare me as much anymore, but they've always had our number, and that does scare me, and Popovich always should scare you. But here's the thing. We're 1-0 against the Spurs, so it's looking good, but we have 3 meetings left down the stretch with the Spurs, and I hope Orlando knows that. You better pay attention, see what these Grizzlies do to you, because it could be a first-round playoff matchup. But the road is extremely tough in the 6th or 7th spot. You're going to have to take down 2 of the top 3 in the Western Conference if you're going to make the Western Conference final, so I'm conflicted there. I don't really want to play the Spurs because they've always owned us. On the other hand, I really don't want to play the Golden State Warriors no matter what because we started out good against them, and now I think it's on. The Warriors are going to have our number. And I'm not as high on the Rockets as everybody else. We're 2-2 against them this year. I think they've really peaked over the last month and a half to 2 months. They're the type of team, if they're not hitting their shots, they're not going to be as effective, even though the Grizzlies' defense has been letting us down as of late. But I really think we could control the tempo there, especially with the inside play, if we work in your man, Zach Randolph, Zebo, and play a little bit more minutes. I don't know what's going on with the Grizzlies right now. They started Andrew Harrison last night, played him 20-25 minutes, and lost to the Brooklyn Nets at home. So I think that's more the thing. We need to get our stuff together no matter who we're going to play. Ideally, I want to climb up and surpass the Clippers somehow to play Utah. That's who I'd really like to play in the first round. I think that's ideally, but we got to get it together. losing at home to the Brooklyn Nets is not a good start. Orlando, how would you feel about our first round matchups with a matchup with the Grizzlies?
Oh man, it's like asking for a bye. I would love that.
Okay.
Jokes aside, again, I don't think the West being so stacked it is, and the teams. I don't think it matters if we end up playing a team like the Grizzlies in the first round. I mean, the Spurs are still going to do what they're going to do, and just like the Grizzlies are going to do what they're going to do too to claw and steer the way in the West Division. But whether we play a team like Oklahoma City or Memphis, I don't think it's gonna matter. I think ideally we would want a team. If the Spurs were to get the number 2 seed in Memphis and the 7th spot, or the Spurs stayed in and move up to the 1st seed, I think ideally we would want probably a team like Memphis and avoid a team, I guess, like Oklahoma City, who give us trouble because just like you said, the Spurs have always had Memphis number. I mean, Oklahoma, even without Durant, is a team that's always give us a run for money and always a scary team to face. So I think facing a team like Memphis or Denver will be ideally for the Spurs in the first round.
So I didn't really hear you address the bashing of Tony Parker. You don't think that plays a little bit of a factor? You don't think that it is actually a year later, despite the Spurs still with a great record, you don't think that come playoff time that they're going to have tendency to get beat down and outrun on the floor like they did last year?
Yeah, but I think that comes down to a lot of the hookah step from in our bench. Parker, it's been a bit painful, and same thing with Ginobili. They're not the same. Parker, not too long ago, he was still able to do stuff for us, but he's coming in. He was barely coming back from injury, and he's not the same guy. But if he's gonna give us that one more run, it'd be great to see it this year. And regardless of the bashing of Parker, I mean, he knows the system well. He knows what he has to do, especially against a team like the Memphis. They're no foes. I mean, they've had some classic battles in the past, and not just in the playoffs, just in the regular season as well. So I'm not too worried about Tony Parker. Yes, the Spurs are a bit older team, but they're not that old overall. I mean, besides Paul Gasol and Marcus Aldridge, I mean, overall the Spurs, they got a pretty young roster, maybe not as developed as some of the other teams, but I'm not too worried about them getting beat down and wore down like they did last season.
To me, it's the backcourt is the problem. You're aging in the backcourt. Other than Kawhi Leonard, your complete backcourt of back in the day is completely aged with Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, who are basically not giving you much at all anymore outside hitting for spurts here and there. But in a playoff series, that does concern me unless someone else emerges big time. Dan, if you were in the Grizzlies' shoes, help out our favorite fans here of My Fantasy Podcast, Nick and Judy Pertins, the Pertins fam. Help them out. If you're the Grizzlies, tell me what you want. Potential first-round matchup if you're the Grizzlies in playoff path.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in the Grizzlies' shoes, I totally want to play the Spurs over the Rockets. I think the Rockets are a dangerous team. I think I said last week in one of our mailbag questions, they're a team besides the Warriors and the Spurs out west, who would you name and that could make it? And I think the Rockets definitely can. I think they're actually the second best team in the West, behind Golden State. But without a healthy KD, they have a chance to advance pretty far. So if I'm the Grizzlies, I look at the molasses and spam burnt Tony Parker. As a scenario, you have to be able to stop Kawhi Leonard, but the pieces that the Spurs have always usually had to make those championship runs, I don't think they have those special pieces anymore. I mean, an aging Parker and Ginobili, an Aldridge that's not playing up to snuff, a Gasol that's injured. There's different pieces that the Spurs really don't have. I mean, it's Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green is another leading scorer, so it's tough. And in a first round matchup, if I can play the Spurs 7 times and you have to worry about minutes and health, I would rather take the Spurs than an energetic Rockets team that's going to play up and down nonstop. every single game and shoot threes, and that's a dagger. If you make 3 threes, I think it was Lou Williams made 3 threes in like 70 seconds in his last game with the Rockets, and it's just a dagger in your heart when that happens.
Yeah. I don't know. The playoffs are a different animal. Like I said, the Grizzlies are finished 2-2 against the Rockets. I think they're maybe 2-1 against Golden State with maybe one more game against Golden State, and they're 1-0 against San Antonio with still 3 games left to play in the regular season. So a lot to shake out in the last 20 games or so as far as the Grizzlies are concerned. But we'll stay on top of it, Nick and Judy Pertins. I promise you that. Let's move on. Get our next question from Oscar Garcia. Help! I need some help. For the fantasy basketball playoffs, who would you rather have, Yogi Ferrell or Tyler Ulis? I'll start out, guys. I didn't even really know Yogi Ferrell was playing like this. I guess I just hadn't been paying attention. I knew Tyler Ulis was a little bit, but I didn't know Yogi Ferrell had pretty much taken over point guard duties in Dallas. If Ferrell keeps playing 30 minutes a game, then I'm going to say Ferrell. The Mavs are still fighting for a playoff spot, still with an outside chance. And if Rick Carlisle has as much trust in Yogi Ferrell to be playing him that much right now, 30, 33 minutes, then I'm going to say Ferrell, roll with him. In Phoenix, there's just so much unknown. That place is just being flipped upside down. I didn't even realize Tyson Chandler had been just like ousted from the team since the All-Star break. Hadn't been playing at all. I've been starting him in my lineup. Come to find out, I need this young dude named Allen Williams, so I picked up Allen Williams. So I don't know what's going on in Phoenix. I think I've decided I got too many Suns on my fantasy team, though. But yeah, I'm right now. The trend is telling me Yogi Ferrell, strike while it's hot. If you're talking about playoffs right now, Dan.
I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Ulis. Ferrell is playing more minutes right now. 29. He averages 29 minutes per game. But Ulis, he's going to be getting more work. Supposedly, that's what I've read. Leading up to the show is that Ulis is going to be given more minutes every night for the rest of the season, and I just think he does a little bit more with it. He
got more ball hogs on his team, though.
Yeah, but playing 10 less minutes a game. You look at the last 10 games. Ulis is only a point behind Ferrell in points scored. Same with assists. A little bit less rebounds. He gets more steals, but the big thing is he shoots at a higher percentage. So, Ulis is shooting 51%, Ferrell 41%. So if you're in a category league where they take those things into an account, I would lean towards Ulis. If it's more points based, that's where you might want to go with a Yogi Ferrell. But both are hot right now, so pick them up if you have the chance, because that's some added depth. Coming down to this postseason run in fantasy basketball.
Yep. I had no idea, but shout out to DDT, Dylan Davis Trotter, who I am playing this week in the final week. Could be a preview of a championship matchup. We'll see. It depends on what Dan does over there. No. But anyway, DDT did pick up Yogi Ferrell, so props to him. Orlando, who would you rather have right now in fantasy, Yogi Ferrell or Tyler Ulis?
I'm going to stick with Ulis as well. And I know it's been kind of a mess, but I just think, Watson, just letting his players kind of go wild. And, he's right in the season out. And I know Dallas is still trying to play for a playoff spot, but I think they're going to play a little bit more conservative compared to Phoenix. So for that reason, and, with Coach Watson trying to see what he has and, kind of not so much let the players do what they want to do, but just kind of let them go out there and, be a little bit more freely now that their season's pretty much over. I'm going to go ahead and stick with Ulis and what he's been able to do over Ferrell.
Yeah, Phoenix season is over, that's for sure. And exactly what you said is why I am picking Yogi Ferrell, because of the conservativeness, and I would translate that to consistency from the Dallas Mavericks. And if Yogi Ferrell keeps getting 30 minutes, and if you're talking about playoffs right now or next week, you need consistency, then I got Yogi Ferrell right now. These two guys got Tyler Ulis.
Wouldn't it be the same thing, though? I mean, I know the Suns ain't playing for much, but if they got nothing to lose, you know what I'm saying? Like, if they got nothing to lose, I don't think that's going to hurt your fantasy team either. They're letting the guys go out there, play those minutes, and score.
No, and I agree with that. And it is up and down, but I think they're trying to find out a lot of what they got right now and do a lot of experimentation. And you got ball hogs on your team like Devin Booker and Eric Bledsoe. They're going to throw up a lot of shots. I don't know about that consistency night in, night out. Not a bad choice, though. I mean, it's a very close race. And like I said, before even looking at this, I didn't even know Yogi Ferrell was in the league. But seeing what he's doing, here's the other thing. One of them is a starter. One of them is not. So, tough choice, Oscar, but I hope we helped you out. The next and final question in our NBA mailbag this week is from Kevin Alvarado. Hey guys, in case you weren't aware, the truth is retiring. Paul Pierce, where does he rank on your list all time? Is he overrated or underrated? Orlando, what do you think? The truth is retiring. Paul Pierce, where does he rank on your all-time great list?
If we're talking about Celtics, I think he stays in the top 5. But if we're talking about overall list, probably somewhere in the 30s or 40s, I would say. And I mean, he's one of those generation players. He's one of those clutch guys, that's going to be brought up. One of those guys who made big shots, and in the early part of his career with the Celtics, you could say he dragged them to the playoffs. He made some big shots for the Nets and Wizards too. But and when it's all said and done, you look at it, it's just one title. No MVPs, no Defensive Player of the Years, no first team select All-NBA selection. So I look at stuff like that compared to some of the other players ahead of him. But again, I just think the reputation he had, the will to win, to go out there and compete. He's one of those tough guys. His defensive, he never won any Defensive Player of the Year, but his defense was pretty stellar. We've had some pretty classic battles with LeBron, and if you were to ask me, I think who was LeBron's biggest rival, I would early on I would say Paul Pierce is pretty much up there. Looking at with the Celtics, the not just between the Celtics and
Kobe,
the Cavs, the Celtics
Paul Pierce and
and,
Kobe,
and the Heat. Paul Pierce and Kobe, but being one of the biggest threats, not so much to Kobe, but to LeBron as well. And so if we're talking about Celtics, definitely top 5. But if we're spreading out the all-time list, I don't think he's within the top 10, but still one of those players who's highly respected and is going to be missed, and especially his toughness.
Well, you said top 40, which is really good. That's probably a realistic range of top all-time greats, ABA and NBA. Are you saying though he's not a Hall of Famer in your eyes? Is he a surefire Hall of Famer or not?
No, I think he's a Hall of Famer, and especially you look at for what he's done for Boston. Besides the Wizards and the Nets, you look at what he's done mainly for Boston, and he did one title, but a lot of times he was a big part of the reason why the Celtics even got to the playoffs, from him dragging them, hitting those big shots, and so I would say he's a Hall of Famer.
Some people would kill for that one title.
Exactly.
Dan, how do you feel about Paul Pierce, Dan? Where does he rank?
I mean, I grew up with Paul Pierce playing in his heyday. Is kind of when I grew up with the NBA. So I watched him a lot. I respected his game. I thought he was the most dramatic player. In the playoffs, being wheeled out on that wheelchair, that's always going to be a memory of mine. Getting wheeled out and getting wheeled back in and coming in and playing. I think he played that off to the best of his abilities. But that's going to be a memory of mine. Just looking up his numbers, I mean, he was durable and consistent. He had 17 straight years of at least 11 points or more a game, and 14 or 15 of those years were over 17 points a game is what he averaged. Then you just look at the amount of games he played each year. I think it was 14 or 15 seasons out of his 17 where he played over 70 games. So, he was going in, night out, putting his heart on the line, putting his all on the line for his basketball team. So, whether he's overrated or underrated, I'd just say he's rated. Not over, not under, depends who you talk to. But I'm with Orlando. He's not an all-time great, definitely a Hall of Famer, first ballot, no doubt. But he's not going to be in my top 15, top 20, top 25, maybe. I mean, he's probably going to be towards the end of that top 50 discussion.
Yeah. And talking about the being wheeled off and then back out. Who was the Marshall quarterback that got Byron Leftwich? That guy. Remember that when his teammates carried him up the field, and that was pretty funny. Different circumstances, but that kind of reminds me of that type of moment in the game. And I agree with you there.
Leftwich actually had a broken leg, though. To give credit to Byron Leftwich, there, he actually had a broken leg. Where I think
a little bit different. Yeah, a little bit different circumstances. Like I said, it was just still that, hey, you've never seen that before. Just one of those, like, at the time when you're watching, you're thinking, damn, that's gutsy.
Yeah.
2 minutes ago, the ambulance was on the court, but definitely Hall of Famer Paul Pierce, 19th in points in NBA history, guys. And I looked at the list today. Do you know who that's ahead of? I'm talking about ABA and NBA history of professional basketball here. 19th in points is the head of KG, his teammate, Reggie Miller, Jerry West, Patrick Ewing, Ray Allen, Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley, Robert Parrish, Elgin Baylor, Clyde Drexler, Gary Payton, and Larry Bird. He did get that one championship in 2008, 10-time All-Star and Finals MVP. More importantly, as Orlando was alluding to, I think Dan mentioned this too, that he kept the Boston Celtics relevant in a time after the Bird era, because there were years, I think in 96 or so, when they won 15 games, and in his rookie year, they only won like 19 games. So bad times in Boston after the Rick Pitino experiment, So it was pretty bad in Boston through a period, and him and Antoine Walker made a resurgence of the Boston Celtics, but he was the one that kept it up and carried that team, put them on his back literally, and did it all, as Orlando was talking about. So no question to me, great player, long career in the NBA, and he's a surefire Hall of Famer. So I don't know. That's for the other pundits to decide. I don't really think that he is underrated. I don't think anyone's saying that. I think everyone would pretty much have him in the Hall of Fame. So we'll see. Let us know what you think. Kevin Alvarado, why did you ask the question? Are you a Paul Pierce lover or a hater? But yeah, we did notice, and I did forget though. Honestly, I did forget. He's kind of quietly retiring, Dan, right?
Yeah, and I think his last game is coming against the Celtics. Like, his last game against the Celtics, against his former team, is coming up soon. It's probably by the time we're on WBLZ. I think it'll already be played, and it's so under the radar. You see Kobe go out last year with such fanfare, and they're not the same type of player, but I would expect a little bit more. I think it's probably because he's at his Tony Parker geriatric state, and his game has taken such a dwindling hit. You don't get many Paul Pierce highlights anymore.
No, not playing many minutes either. Maybe we'll have that playoff moment, so we'll see. Maybe we'll have that playoff moment, kind of like Vince Carter, although Vince Carter is playing. You remember that last year in Dallas, and we stepped up big in the playoffs. So maybe he has that kind of moment or two in the playoffs this year, and that will send him out the right way. But definite Hall of Famer. Let's talk NFL next. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. I am Brandon Reed, got Dan Schalk on the line there in Orlando. Let's open up NFL talk. This is Dan's big area here. Let's talk about reactions from what we saw in the combine over the last few days. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a whole lot of it. Try to keep up with a little bit in kind of the breaking news, but so much going on in sports right now. That's why NFL off-season news, although it be it big news, is pushed to the back of the show this week. Just so much going on. So Dan, just combine reactions overall, and not necessarily this year, just how much importance do you weigh on the combine? How much do you look forward to it?
I like it. I definitely try and watch as much as I possibly can, as much as people in my household will tolerate. Just people and athletes in shorts running, doing drills. I put a little bit of stock in it. You want to get a general idea of what a prospect runs and what their vertical is and things like that. I look at the drills a little bit more in perspective, how a guy's moves on the field, especially defensive back drills and quarterback drills. Those are kind of the two that I look at the most, of how fluid either a quarterback is passing or when I scout defensive backs, a lot of it is in the hip movement, and what kind of movement are they getting? Are they a fluid hip, going in between from the back pedal to straight line speed? So there's different types of things that you look at. So I watched quite a bit, this weekend. I like what I see, just watching the prospects run and do all that. So it's definitely a good time of year. But it's not a huge barometer of, if I would place a first round or second round grade on a person. People might move up or down, but it's not everything to me. Still, what they do on the field, the game tape of how they actually play football is my number one barometer of how I grade those athletes.
There's guys that could always stand out and have such a good performance that they went from literally off the radar onto someone's big board, though.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you saw that this weekend with Obi Melifontainu, Wana, whatever you want to call him.
Glad you said it first, not me.
Yeah, the defensive back out of UConn. I mean, he put up some freak numbers, 40-time vertical inch. I think it was 44 inches, and he was upset about it. Thought he was going to jump a lot higher than that. So he put up some freak numbers, and I think you're going to see him enter probably a day 2 consideration for some teams. His teammate Byron Jones, I think Orlando and I know quite well, being drafted by the Cowboys after a freak combine that he put up. So it vaulted him into the first round, and I didn't have a first round grade on him then. It's turned out pretty well. He's been pretty good in his career, although short. So you never know what's going to happen there, but that's a guy that probably helped his status more than anything.
Well, so while we're talking about the combine, let's go ahead and start addressing our mailbag questions of the NFL in our NFL bag this week. And the first one comes from John Lissel. Is that Lissel or was that Little, Dan? Do you know? Was that a typo?
Lissel. No, yeah, okay. No, I think it is Lissel. There is an S.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because I actually went to school with a guy named John Little, so I didn't know if that was maybe a typo or if that's really John Lissel. So anyway, the fan of my fantasy podcast, John, that's what I'm going to call you, fantasy podcast fan, John. He wants to know who stood out to you guys in the NFL Combine. So Dan just kind of answered it there a little bit. We'll come back and talk about it a little bit more. But Orlando, what was your reactions from the Combine? Do you even keep up with this? Is this something that you really do mark down on your calendar to see? Watch particular guys or get a good barometer of who may be drafted higher or lower than what people are saying?
Yeah, no, I kept up with the Combine, got to catch quite a bit of it. I mean, and besides some of the big names that you expected to go in there and dominate, like a Myles Garrett, who, a pretty stellar performance, of John Ross, of course, who set the all-time record for the run that he did. And looking at something like that, I mean, the drama that that the NFL guys just put into it. I remember looking at it and I was I didn't know what to expect. Like we've heard a lot about Ross, but the drama that that kind of, I guess, they kind of built up the guy. Like they had like the stop guys coming, like making sure like the timing was right. You had like all this drama built up to, which they're
selling it. I mean, the NFL Network owns it, so they're selling it.
Yeah, so they sold it pretty well. I mean, that was pretty entertaining. Christian McCaffrey was one of the guys who stood out to me. I know everybody's talking a lot about like Leonard Fournette and some of these other running backs, but I like Christian McCaffrey a lot, and I think he feels like he's being overlooked. I don't think that so much, but I thought he had a really good showing. And one of the guys who I was kind of upset I didn't get to see was D'Onta Foreman. I know he had the foot injury going on, and Jamal Williams didn't have so much of a good outing either out of BYU. But Christian McCaffrey, of course, John Ross, and those guys really made a huge deal. A big flash from when I was watching.
Well, you mentioned a couple of the obvious ones. Of course, John Ross, with a record time 4.2240, but also pretty good a broad jump at 11.1, and so. Of course, he stood out. Now, you mentioned Christian McCaffrey, and this is a guy who said posted, when all said and done, posted top 5 scores in the 40 vertical jump, 3-cone drill, and 20 and 60-yard shuttle run. So doing very well. A pretty dynamic back. Dan, did you do your draft profile on Christian McCaffrey? And forgive me, you've put out so many, I can't keep up with all of them. I'm sure you probably did. Did you, and what did you think? If not, is it coming?
Yeah, no, I have. He was one of the first guys I scouted when doing the running back. So yeah, the profile is on the site. He does have a first round grade, although I will admit, watching some of the backs that I've watched after McCaffrey, he's dropped down my list. He's not actually in my top 5 running backs currently. So he had an impressive combine. I didn't like his bench, although, you don't look at bench. I think he put up 10 reps. A guy that I like, I don't have him ranked higher on my top 20 rankings, but I think he's 5'7" on a good day, 160 pounds soaking wet, and that's Tariq Cohen out of NCA&T, an FCS school. He put up 11 reps, ran a 4.42 40, and was pretty similar across the board in how McCaffrey performed in his drills, and you don't see him get any type of love or credit. So watch out for his name, Tariq Cohen. His nickname is the Human Joystick. So anybody who has that kind of nickname, you're going to want on your NFL team, and he's a sleeper to watch in the draft. But McCaffrey is a solid player. I actually like him more as a receiver than a running back in the NFL.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I kind of liked about McCaffrey is his ability to catch the ball as well. Not so much his run, but like his ability to catch the ball. I think kind of rose his stock a bit. But I don't know. We've seen that a lot out of some of these other running backs.
Well, and Dan, you mentioned your profile, so you do have him as a first round talent.
Yeah, so in the profiles I do a draft projection. So it's not necessarily a grade where I would take that player. Like if I was a GM, I would take McCaffrey in the 2nd round. But I think a team might reach it and grab him late first. I can see him going.
Okay, and so who was your NFL comparison, if you remember offhand?
Honestly, I don't remember offhand, but I will. I'm going to have it for you shortly. How about that?
Yep. Someone that can catch the ball out of the backfield, though, I assume.
Actually, you know what? I do remember who it is. It was Giovanni Bernard, and that is a guy who can catch it out of the backfield. Kind of those a scattish back.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Very impressive at Stanford. We'll see what happens. So I want to talk quarterbacks real quickly because, of course, what I saw is Deshaun Watson didn't really miss any throws. He was displayed precision accuracy and was very impressive with pretty much all the throws he made. Didn't lose stock for sure. If anything, maybe solidified that he may be the most NFL ready out of this projected top round group. But another guy who we're saying pretty much made his mark on this combine is a guy who may not even play quarterback in the NFL just because he put up so many athletic freakish numbers, and that is Trevor Knight out of Texas A&M. Led his group in the 40 vertical jump, broad jump, and finished 2nd in the 20-yard shuttle. So what did you see out of the quarterback position out of the combine draft, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Knight definitely was impressive in the in those type of speed drills and events at the combine. He has some technical flaws in his game that I think is even going to prevent him from being drafted. I don't see him being drafted
at quarterback though. Maybe somewhere else.
At quarterback. Who knows if he'll switch positions if a team will give him a shot somewhere. But in terms of the other quarterbacks, yeah, I thought it was. Nobody hurt their stock. Nobody helped their stock too much. I mean, Watson was pretty solid. Trubisky actually was pretty good in my eyes. The guys like Deshaun Kaiser, he was hit or miss, but his tape is hit or miss. He's got probably the most powerful arm in the entire draft class, but he can hit a bullseye 1 second and then the next second throw it 50 yards beyond that bullseye. So he's got some serious accuracy issues. The quarterbacks, I studied them pretty good, but nobody seemed to set themselves apart too much, but nobody really hurt themselves either.
Orlando, out of the draft class that you didn't like, or who was sticking out to you?
Oh, well, one of the guys I was kind of, I mean, besides the top three that that are the obvious choices, one of the guys who I kind of had an eye on was Patrick Mahomes. But he's one of the guys who has a lot of question marks too, and I'm sure Dan knows a lot about him, especially with his draft profiles. A huge arm. He could pretty much a gunslinger, could chunk the ball, but his footwork is questionable. You kind of worry about like if he can scramble out of the pocket, and I think that's one guy who pretty much didn't better himself at the combine. I think he still has a lot of trouble with that. As far as Watson, yeah, I think he sold himself as probably the top quarterback right now coming out of the class. Talking about footwork, I think his footwork, and especially in the cone drills, and not so much the throws, but some of the footwork and the way he's able to improvise, I think that definitely rose his stock compared to some of the other guys. Kind of put some of the rest of the talk on Trubisky or Kaiser as those guys come in as some of the top, and I think that definitely helped Watson.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next mailbag question and talk about one guy specifically, and that is Jabril Peppers. The next question comes from Rashad Tate, where from second overall all the way to the bottom of round one. Thoughts? Dan, let's go to you first. What about Jabril Peppers?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of an odd prospect. You don't get too many Jabril Peppers coming into the draft too often. Is he a linebacker? Is he a defensive back? Can he play offense? Is he a returner? Where exactly do you put him? Can he play all 4 downs? It's tough. I mean, I haven't gotten to fully scouting every single one of his games like I usually would. His profile will be eventually coming. But I would lean more towards the end of round one. I don't see him translating as a linebacker in the NFL. That's what he wants to play. I don't see it. I think him more as a safety. But at the same time, if you look at his stats, he doesn't have that good of coverage skills. I think one stat that I looked up in briefly scouting him, when he is defending the primary receiver on the play in man coverage, I think it was like 75% of the throws, or even higher than that, get completed against him. It's something astronomical. So I don't think he has the exact talent. I just think finding a fit in a defensive scheme for him will be a little bit difficult. He has talent, no doubt, and he has athletic ability, but does that necessarily translate to the NFL game is going to be the question.
That's exactly the problem I have with it. It's really going to, as far as the draft goes, it's really going to depend on team need, position they're drafting, who's left, what role the team sees that Peppers fits in. Like you just said, it could be a multiple of things. He really is undersized for an NFL linebacker, and I think you would agree with that, Dan. That's part of the problem. If he wants to play linebacker, really undersized to play linebacker in the NFL. He has the instincts for it. That's the problem. He probably would be a better linebacker, just not the size. His size is more of a corner or safety, but not the instincts. So that's the flip-flop. But you mentioned returner, and that's where he does add incredible value as a returner. So I think the instincts are there. I think he could be a really good football player. It's going to depend on who sees what in him and where they're drafting. And Rashad Tatum, he said he's seen him anywhere as high as anywhere from the second overall all the way down to the bottom of round one. So that just kind of got me looking, and I'm not really good at this, folks. Okay, this is a lot more Dan's forte because it's so many unknowns and just so many possibilities. There's so many activities that you could do here, and it's hard for me. But I just kind of looked at it. I put him as high as number 11 to a team like New Orleans just because they could use the return help and the defensive help. Just throw him out there, whatever you think he could help you at. And New Orleans needs help all over the place. So and need return help because they were at the bottom of the NFL in return yardage last year. As far as being at the bottom of round one, I had a place like Houston at number 25 because, again, they could use the return help. They could use the excitement on offense, period. So just put him out there in whatever way you think he's going to help the team, not necessarily take someone's spot, but whatever way he could help the team on defense, because there's a good chance that J.J. Watt or Brian Cushing will go down again next year at some point in the season. So insert him. You're not taking a really huge risk if you're Texas, although they could spend the money other places for sure, like offensive line. But like I said, it's going to depend on who's left at the particular time you draft and what the needs are. But I think Peppers, he's borderline first-round talent to me. Probably should be maybe second, again, depending on draft needs. Orlando, what do you think about Jabril Peppers?
Yeah, as far as where he's going at in draft, I'm not too sure yet. I know in the early part of mock drafts, I wasn't seeing him in the first round at all. But after his outing at the Combine, I'm seeing him kind of, make his way up towards the ending of the first round, like around pick 25 or so. I've seen him ranging from 17 to 25 to teams like San Francisco or Houston. I think he could be a great fit for Houston, just like you mentioned. Again, it just like you mentioned, you already hit the nail on the head. It just comes down to what a team needs, and what he's able to do. I think he is a pretty good returner, and safety, just like Dan mentioned, that could be a mess. With the number that he threw, that the completions that when he's targeted, the completions against him, and his size when it comes to linebacker as well. So no doubt that he's a hell of a player. But I think, just like you mentioned with Houston, I think that's some pretty good depth as a returner that could possibly work out. So I think he will be towards the end of the first round, or early day 2 pick, but I don't think he's going within the top 10, 15 picks.
There you go. We'll see. That's a very interesting one to keep an eye on, though, Rashard Tatum, and we'll see what happens. So that's the perfect opportunity for me to mention to you folks at home that my fantasy podcast is going to be live the night of the draft for the whole thing, the whole first round. We're gonna, me and Dan are gonna have just a host of writers on the show, a lot of hometown guys to talk about their teams in the draft live on draft night, all the way through the whole thing live. So normally we're throwing those articles out at there. We're gonna do even at you every draft night. We're gonna do it even bigger and better this year with having a live draft show right here on YouTube. So let's talk real quickly before we end this thing about NFL free agents. Any news y'all have seen? A lot of the top NFL free agents right now. This is one of the more interesting things about the NFL season. Is so many guys we saw move last year, like right off the top, like Matt Forte. We saw Lamar Miller move last year. One of the guys I was high on, Mohamed Sanu, went to Atlanta. So this is a very interesting time of the year. A.J. Bouye, Dante Hightower, Calais Campbell, Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Williams, Dontari Poe, Nick Perry, Terrell Pryor, Jabal Shur, Deshaun Jackson, Logan Ryan, Martellus Bennett. I'm just going through the list kind of randomly. Morris Claiborne, Nick Fairley, Russell Okung, Prince Amukamara. A lot of different guys. I recommend any of you listening and watching at home, just look up the list. So many different players. Again, so many activities. Free agency is a very hot time, Dan. You got to be loving it. And have you heard anything? Is anything broke here in the last half a day or so that I didn't get?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some rumors. One that I'm keeping my eye on is the status of Mike Glennon, where he's going to go. I've read reports that Chicago is very interested to make him their starting quarterback, and I like the move by Chicago. I think that's you're locking up a potential franchise quarterback in free agency, but he's not going to come cheap. I mean, I've read that he turned down $8 million a year to be Tampa Bay's backup, so he wants to play. He's going to get his chance. So I look to a team like that. And, we talked last week about Adrian Peterson and how we both think he's washed up. But I've read today that he's interested in possibly taking less money to sign with the Patriots. That'll be intriguing. I've also heard that they're not going to bring back LeGarrette Blount. So they're going to have a need at running back. Opposite of those two pass-catching Deion Lewis and James White. They need that power back. So maybe AP can be that, but I think we know free agency is an exciting time, and as soon as March 9th hits, it's going to be a free fall.
That fumble in the Super Bowl did Blount in, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, but he had a solid career. Hey, led the league in rushing touchdowns this season. I don't think there's going to be much of a market for him. So fantasy football buyers, beware! Don't draft LeGarrette Blount next year if he goes away from New England.
Orlando, being a big Dallas Cowboy fan, I know you've had your eye on somebody and want to see, where a few of these guys go. But is there anybody you're eyeing specifically as a Cowboys fan?
Well, I know earlier Dan mentioned something about letting Terrence Williams test free agency or letting him go, and some of the options. I know Kenny Britt's not the sexiest pick, but I know they've also expressed interest in a guy like Deshaun Jackson, which he has the speed, he could be a pretty good player, but we've seen that guy kind of break down from time to time too. Has that lingering hamstring injury. And so, that's a move that we've been keeping an eye on who's going to be on the other side of Dez Bryant. And I know last week too, there was a bit, with the whole where's Romo going? There was a big trade or rumor coming out. It was, I'm sure you guys heard about it too. It was all over social media and media outlets everywhere that there was supposed to be this big 3-way trade with the Redskins and I believe it was the 49ers. But obviously that was shot down because Jerry Jones said he cannot stomach the fact that Romo could go and play for division rival like the Redskins. But with that being shot down, there was other teams that came out interested. With the whole Romo thing, like Jaguars, Chiefs, and the 49ers at that too. And I know earlier I was reading a couple articles saying that don't be surprised if, you were to see Romo release even before Thursday, before free agency even begins, possibly, tonight through the morning or, through Thursday morning before it, it officially begins. So, that's one thing to keep an eye on, whether he goes to Denver, Houston. It's going to be interesting. I think he's a better fit with the Texans, if you ask me. But that's going to be a bit of a roller coaster to follow. And with that, of course, if he were to land with a team like Denver, you hear about Trevor Siemian making his way out of Denver, probably play for a team like Buffalo because, he's going to want out of there because I'm sure a guy like that is going to want to play.
Yeah, definitely. No reason not to. Tyrod's a 2-time Pro Bowler right now.
Ugh.
Man, a lot going on. And I'm with Dan there. I think one of the more interesting moves is probably going to be Mike Glennon because I've heard rumors about him possibly going to Chicago. I think a team will go for Mike Glennon in the offseason. That may be one of the more safer choices out there. I'm talking to 2 Cowboys fans here, so Tony Romo excluded, okay? I think Mike Glennon is one of the more safer choices out of the free agents and the quarterbacks in the draft class.
I think one of the guys we mentioned earlier too, who's still on a trade block, but you haven't heard much news of, is Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the Patriots are kind of waiting for that perfect offer, but I know he's a guy. Hard to, it won't be hard to see. Maybe on draft day, maybe someone makes a move for a guy like Garoppolo.
Yeah. I'm not sure he's moving. I'm just still not sure he's moving, but free agency is about to really get down to business. So we'll bring you more next week. I promise you. Not really a whole lot to report right now. We're kind of in that calm before the storm period in the free agency period. So a lot more to talk about next week. I guarantee you. Woo. That was a My Fantasy Podcast, folks. Dan, tell everybody at home what's going on the site right now. Besides draft profiles that you're spitting out.
Yeah, obviously the draft profiles are taking up most of the NFL section, entertainment section, doing their usual busting out content and all the shows, movies, comics, music, finger painting, like Brandon says in the beginning. Sometimes we'll cover it. So it's doing very well. Wrestling is picking back up on the site. We're getting a couple good articles a week now, covering the WWE and different things. So definitely check it out. It's an exciting time, and of course with March Madness, you're going to get the coverage at My Fantasy Sports Talk. Whether it's game previews, sleeper picks of who to pick for your bracket. Definitely stay tuned.
We have a lot of great wrestling writers on staff right now, so check it out, myfantasysportstalk.com if you haven't been checking it out. If you have been checking it out, you probably know there's been an insurgence of wrestling and WWE articles and great ones and very popular ones as well. But also, Dan, how exciting is it? NFL Draft Night, April 27th, Thursday night. We are live, My Fantasy Podcast, through the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought it up to you earlier, yesterday about possibly doing a live show, and I think it's something we're both pretty excited about, and being able to talk those NFL draft picks as they happen live on YouTube for everybody to see. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but ESPN with Mel Kiper can get a little dull and a little bit like kind of licking toast. And then you turn on NFL Network, and then there's Mike Mayock, and you just want to stick your head in a blender. So if you would rather not stick your head in a blender and lick burnt toast, join us on Draft Night on YouTube, talking the draft, and we're going to have a lot of great guests on the show. And I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Because this is so much better. And no, not a fan of Mike Mayock either, and Mel Kiper, hey, Todd. And anyway, yes, it could get old as well. This is new. This is fresh. My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. Hey, appreciate it. All the guys that submitted questions all week long, and appreciate you guys who submitted the questions that we actually read on air today on today's show. Oscar Garcia, Kevin Alvarado, Belinda Watson, Alex Freeman, John Whistle, Rashad Tatum, and our number one fans from West Memphis, Dan, the Purtons fam, Nick and Judy. We appreciate it. So that's going to wrap up this edition. So much. I don't even know where to begin of what to even get into next year. What did we leave out next week? What did we leave out this week? What can we talk about next week? We'll give it a shot next week. NCAA tournament predictions, NFL free agent moves, NBA news, and our weekly countdown of the Pelicans record since the DeMarcus Cousins trade. That's my new segment. I inserted that one, so get ready for it next week too. All that and more next week on My Fantasy Podcast. Come back, keep clicking, keep listening, keep watching on YouTube, on the site, myfantasysportstalk.com, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network, and on WBLZSports.com, the WBLZ Sports Network, every Friday afternoon on your primetime drive from 3 to 5 Eastern Time. Check us out. For Orlando Torres and Dan Shaw, I am Brandon Reed. Until next week, we will see you then. Keep clicking, keep listening, keep watching on all the avenues. Come back every single week and keep submitting the questions. Appreciate it. Later.